Chairwoman of the Pullman Police Advisory Committee. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for those of you who are watching online. Just since there's a lot of new people here, mostly member applicants, but let's just go around and introduce ourselves first, just so people will know who we are in the committee, and then we'll go ahead and get to approving the minutes. So Gary Jenkins, our Chief of
Gary
Police.
Jenkins, Pullman Police Chief.
Phyllis Stahlkopf, Sunnyside Hill Representative.
Barbara Hammond, College Hill Representative.
Corey.
Matthew Sutherland, College Hill.
Justin Brackey, Military Hill.
Amy Newsbaum, Military Hill.
Richard Hume, Pioneer Hill.
Okay, thank you for introducing yourselves to everybody. So why don't we go ahead, did anyone have any disputes in the minutes at all from September? Oh, I just noticed one change and that was already made, so if I hear them.
I move approval.
Okay,
Seconded.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that was easy. So we have new membership applicants on here, but we also have a presentation from Nicholas Hudson, who's going to talk to us about the WSU Greek system, and he's going to give us a good presentation today. I think we're going to switch those around just so we can get him in and out of here, and we can hear, everybody has a chance to hear what he has to say today. So we can go ahead and get started in that.
Great. So I appreciate the opportunity to come and speak with y'all. I think this is the button for picture meeting. Wonderful. So my name is Nicholas Hudson. I'm an assistant director in the Center for Fraternity and Sorority Life here at Washington State University. And I just want to thank you all for inviting us to come speak about a very vibrant community that we have at Washington State, and that really is one of the defining communities that we do have. And so what we wanted to do is to go over some of the basics of our Greek community. I did hand out a one-page document that details some of the fast facts as well as the listing of chapters. And we'll talk about that as we move through here. What we are in the Center for Fraternity and Sorority Life and all of our 71 organizations, we exist really to make men better men and women better women through very different values that we have. Every organization was founded on a base of values. And so these values are aiming to help the students that we work with become really, in the truest forms, global citizens, really committed to those values and putting forth positive relationships. So how do we build better men and better women is through skill development. These organizations, while they are private organizations, really center on a lot of development in communication, business, cultural competency, citizenship, really defining the way and who they want to be as 18 to 24-year-olds. Overall, in our office, we have 5 governing councils, and I think that's what makes our community unique and very different from some of the other communities and student organizations that we have at Washington State University. These organizations, all 71 of them, are privately ran, meaning that they have a relationship between the institution, but given their individual's constitutional right to exist and free speech and freedom of association, these organizations have been founded really since the founding of our U.S. Higher education system. So at our institution, we have the Interfraternity Council, which is our residential fraternities. Some of them are also non-residential. We have our Panhellenic organization, which are the women's residential organizations. We then have our United Greek Council, which are our multicultural fraternities and sororities. We have our National Panhellenic Council, which are historically black Greek letter organizations. And then we also have our Professional Greek Council, which is made up of academic-oriented an academic-based organization, so business fraternities or band sororities, things of that nature. So they all fall underneath our office, and our office is there as an advisement structure. So I'm one of the assistant directors in our office. We have 2 additional assistant directors, an associate dean / dean of students, as well as other support staff. So we're very much built towards helping these students navigate their governance and navigate making sure that they're being positive members of the Pullman and WSU communities. Once again, we have 71 fraternal organizations, and approximately 1 out of 4 students at WSU is a member of one of these organizations. And so that makes us a very large community. We are the second largest community beyond ASWSU, so we're the second largest organization at WSU. And I really think that speaks volumes to the storied history that we have. Our Greek organizations have been at Washington State University for over 100 years. And I think that really speaks to this idea of building a sense of community here in Pullman as folks are away. Some of the community values that all of our organizations have, one of them is relationship building. And so the hope is that these organizations, the members in these organizations, build lifelong relationships, not only with themselves, but with other members of the WSU and Pullman community. As I mentioned, we've been here for well over 100 years, and we continue to grow. Our community is at its largest that we've ever been. We continue to have students, over record numbers of students registering for recruitment and wanting to join these organizations. These organizations, as they are privately run organizations, really develop students' leadership in a way that they wouldn't get in other locations. For example, they get to run multi-million-dollar budgets. They get to meet with faculty, staff, administrators, plan events, interact with people on a national and international level, much more than they do when they're not in a Greek organization. We know that a majority of our students are actively involved in campus life, including historically now, I think going back at least 15 years, either the president or the vice president of the student body is a member of a Greek organization. And we know that they're participating at higher levels and in being engaged at the WSU campus Pullman community at higher levels. And that speaks to their community service. In 2016, which is the last year we've had data for, they performed over 60,000 hours of community service, which represents 45% of all community service done at WSU by WSU students. So a quarter of the student population is doing almost half of all community service that's registered through the Center for Civic Engagement. Not all community service that's done is done through and registered through the Center for Civic Engagement. They are also raising hundreds of thousands of dollars for local and national nonprofit organizations through their philanthropic efforts. They've raised, last year alone, over $5,000 for local food pantries, or excuse me, 5,000 pounds for our local food pantries. We know that service, whether it's community service or philanthropic giving, is a core tenet of these organizations, both here at Pullman as well as on a national level. We know that from data from Gallup, as well as the research we've done here at Washington State University, that our members are engaged, not only with their community, but engaged at work after they've graduated college, and really engaged in healthy relationships and healthy decision-making as it relates to their personal and private lives, personal and public lives. We also know that our Greek organizations help recruit, retain, and graduate its members at higher rates than those that are not members of our organizations. Finally, we know that our students in our Greek organizations have had a higher GPA because of their membership in these Greek organizations. They have, over the last 6 years, exceeded the all men and all women's GPA average by substantive amounts. We have scholarship programs, we have study tables, we have different engagement, whether it's working with faculty through research and things of that nature that these students are doing. So I'm going to explain a little bit about the differences between our communities. We have a multicultural Greek community as well as a residential Greek community. Our multicultural organizations are very vibrant. We have the largest multicultural Greek community in the Pacific Northwest here at Washington State University, and one of the largest in the country. Right now we have 19 multicultural fraternities and sororities. We also have a co-ed organization that falls in there. And we have 3 historically black Greek letter organizations. These organizations are almost the exact same thing as our residential organizations, except for they're smaller, They don't have a chapter facility, and then one of them's co-ed. And so they really do the exact same thing as other ones. In fact, these organizations these 22 organizations themselves performed over 12,000 hours of community service, and they only have about 270 members. So these organizations are really committed to giving back to the community. Not to say that our Greek row fraternities and sororities are not, it's just that's the way in which these organizations were founded. We have 14 Panhellenic residential sororities, which are over there on College Hill in those larger facilities, as well as 29 residential and non-residential fraternities. Their chapter sizes range from the women, average chapter size right now is about 175. So this number is a little skewed. And our average men's size is about 65. Some of them are as small as 15, ranging all the way up to about 130, 140. They live in the residence. It's very much ran like a very large home. There are sleeping porches and things of that nature that we can talk to you about another time. One thing that we really want to emphasize, these are privately owned facilities owned by someone who is not affiliated with the institution itself. These are operated by their national headquarters, which are not located for the most part in the state of Washington. Actually, none of them are. And some of them choose or not choose to house freshmen. There's an actual process in which they have to be approved by the university to house freshmen, as the university has a first-year live-in requirement. 21 of the residential fraternities and sororities, so 7 of the fraternities and 14 of the sororities chose to house freshmen this year. This is the process that they have to go to house freshmen. I think it's important to note that the university does play a role in that. So they have to go through inspections, have sprinklers. They have to also be alcohol-free if they choose to house first-year students, which is very different. And they also have to employ either a live-in, facility manager, a house director, things of that nature. And so in the chapter facilities, they are provided what they would exactly get in the residence halls, and so that's why that's the university approved. So they have laundry, they have internet services, they have meals, whether they're catered or they have their own private cooks, all through their own facility. And so I think now it's time for questions, because I think a lot of times that folks really wanted to ask questions about our sorority and fraternity community at WSU. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually follow you on Twitter, so hi. That was a weird intro. So, question, I used to work for admissions, so I'm sort of familiar with the idea of university-approved freshman housing. And I think that's the alcohol-free clause is really easy to enforce for sororities, right, because they're typically dry anyway. How does a university actually enforce, specifically for fraternities, that those houses are actually remaining dry for those 7 of them that have decided to house freshmen?
That's a great question, and I think in and of itself, it's a community policing model, very similar to how we have here in the city of Pullman. If there's an incident, it has to be reported to us. We're not going to go and check their facilities on a random Friday night, as I'm not over there on College Hill. I live over on Sunnyside, so I'm not going to want to go over there, although I have done a ride-along, which it was phenomenal to see the great community policing that we have going on there on College Hill. But really, it's if people receive a complaint and or we suspect things of that nature, our Office of Student Conduct will conduct an investigation, and then that organization potentially will lose their university-approved housing status. These are businesses, and so I do want to emphasize that in some aspect. They operate like businesses. If they can't house freshmen, they can't meet their mortgage payments and things of that nature, and so they know that if they lose that status, they've lost out on income that they will have to then find an alternative way to do that. And so I do think there's some level of self-policing and community policing from each other to make sure that they're doing that. It's a very rigorous process to become a university-approved facility.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Excellent presentation, thank you. How do you explain the difference in the, it was a big difference, the sorority, fraternity residents? There were 3 times more women. What's going on?
More women are interested in joining sororities, and that's just on a national level. It's very much like that, where they are seeking that. Their process is actually much more structured as well. So this year, for example, we had over 1,000 women go through sorority recruitment. The men had 300. It's not as structured in that sense. There's also a much larger choice for the men. There's 29 fraternities versus 50 or 14 for the sororities. And so if we were to have more sororities, which we are potentially looking at adding additional sororities, that number will be reduced some. But we know that historically, especially over the last 15 years, the amount of women and men in general, wanting to join our Greek community has continued to increase exponentially. I don't know how else to explain it other than that.
Another question?
Yeah.
Cynical as a WSU retiree, you had a lot of good statistics there. What the administration would be concerned about, and I'm revealing my bias, is what do fraternity and sorority alums give to the university in donations as graduates as opposed to non-fraternity and non-dorm residents?
That's a great question, and I can give you a ballpark figure. The direct figure should be directed to the WSU Alumni and/or Development Office. It's upwards of, if I'm not mistaken, 70% of all donations to the institution from individual donors are from members of a Greek organization at WSU.
That's impressive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have a couple questions different from each other. You said about 1,000 women went through recruitment. How many of those pledge?
We have and so it's a very complicated formula that goes through, and so I do want to say that it's a little bit complicated. We had about 700 women who actually ended up joining their own sorority. Of those, women who maximized their preferences all the way through every single round of recruitment, we have an 86 to 90% placement rate. What ends up happening, why that number seems a little lower, is that women drop out themselves. They realize, you know what, this isn't for me right now, but I'll ultimately decide to join it in the future or things of that nature. Or they did not maximize their preferences as they go through the different rounds. It's, like I said, it's a little complicated, but for the most part, we have a 86 to 90% placement rate.
Okay. And my second question is a little different. On other campuses, are historically black fraternities and universities residential or not?
They are multicultural, so both are multicultural, whether they're Latinx or Asian Pacific Islander, and even our historically black Greek letter organizations known as NPHC, they are not residential. And this goes across the country. There are a few campuses that have some sort of residential component to them. None here in the Pacific Northwest. And I would say very few, if any, on the entire West Coast. It's historically down in the Deep South as well as the Mid-Atlantic that they have those chapter facilities because they have larger chapters. Our NPHC community, which is our historically black Greek letter organizations, I've had this like frog in my throat. There's 12 members in that community. In the South, there are upwards of 100 in each sorority or fraternity. So we're the largest NPHC community with 12 in the entire Pacific Northwest. So it's just a very different environment.
Okay, thank you.
Matthew?
I have a couple questions for you.
Yeah.
First off, thank you for coming and giving us a wonderful presentation. We appreciate it, and thank you for allowing us to pester you with questions as well.
You're good.
One of mine is, national headlines have certainly been taken up by a lot of what's going on in Congress, but a couple things that happened to go on to Washington Post and BBC happened to be harassment and hazing at Greek and fraternity organizations on college campuses. And I know you've emphasized a couple times that your organization, what you work for, is separate from the university, or the Greek system is separate from the university. I was wondering if you could detail sort of some of the accountability process for hazing, what happens, and how WSU and our campus compares to other college campuses as far as that goes.
So that's a great question. So I just want to be clear. So these organizations, while they are private organizations, they do have a relationship with the university. It's an agreement that they have to sign annually. This agreement was mandated by the HEVE bill, which was a law passed by the Washington State Legislature in 1993. It expired in 2014, so it sunset in 2014, which that law required annually that fraternities, sororities had to sign an agreement with each institution that they're at in the state of Washington, as well as had to be educated on alcohol, drug education, as well as sexual assault prevention, as well as hazing prevention. While that law has expired and sunset, the councils, the governing councils, have still put into place the very similar requirements, and so those requirements are starting to put into place. As it relates to hazing in some of the larger cases, whether it's Penn State or at LSU or Clemson or things of that nature, no campus is in any way, shape, or form immune, and I would argue that no organization is immune from hazing. Hazing exists because there's a power differential between existing members and new members. Hazing happens in military organizations and happens in residential, not residential, but registered student organizations. It happens in club sports. It happens in bands. I'm looking down at the Florida A&M where there was a severe death that happened in about 2013, 2014, of a band member that had to run the gauntlet from the front of the bus to the back of the bus. The reason why I bring those up is while every organization may have that power differential, what we have noticed here at Washington State University is those severe cases that happen, similar to at Penn State and LSU, they're far and few between. Our students have really taken a step and said, we don't believe in this idea of hazing. They also, because of the uniqueness of the state of Washington, know that if their organization is found responsible for hazing, not an individual, but an organization is found responsible for hazing, the state law requires the university to unrecognize that fraternity or sorority. And so because that's the case, they know that a lot of things are at stake. And so how do we, shape up to accountability standards across the country? I think that's a question for the Office of Student Conduct. Everything as it relates to adjudication of university policies and procedures goes through the Office of Student Conduct, not through the Center for Fraternity and Sorority Life. We're there to advise students and to help them navigate through the policies and procedures that they have. We don't adjudicate any of those things. If we hear light of it, as all university employees are mandated reporters, we forward it on to the Office of Student Conduct. In every community, in every organization, there's a couple of bad apples sometimes that really try to take things to the next level. And I would say that Washington State University is not immune to that. However, by and large, a majority of our students have said this is not acceptable in our community.
Well, thank you. My other question is a lot easier. I just want to know if these organizations on the back were all from WSU.
These are all the campuses or the organizations represented on our campus. As of June. So on the back here, Phi Delta Theta no longer is on our campus. That was a typo. And then we left one off under IFC, Farmhouse is missing. And so that's the only one that is missing there. It was just, there's 71 of them. We're trying our best. Sometimes our little fact sheets don't get out there.
Well, thank you for answering my questions.
Yep.
Appreciate it, sir.
Yep. Anything else I can help you all with? Our office is located in Cub 315. We are more than happy to answer any questions as it relates to things. I do want to say from just a personal standpoint as well as from a university standpoint, the level of community policing that we have up on College Hill with Alex and previous to that to Shane, the students really appreciate the level of interaction and the way in which they're working with them, and that makes our lives a lot easier. From a administrative level, I do appreciate that type of model that we have going on here. I think it's wonderful. Other schools do not have this, and there's a lot more antipathy between the university, the community, and the police, and that creates some negative reactions. And I think the way we're doing it here is wonderful.
So, one quick question is, do you guys have like some sort of general overall meetings for people who are in sororities and fraternities that talk about safety and address community interactions and conduct and things like that? And how does that work?
So yeah, so our education processes are numerous. I think that's one of the jobs that we do at Washington State University is educating our students. So annually, we have various educational activities that are meant to educate them around risk management and being good community members. So all of our incoming students have a workshop that they have to go through while they're going through recruitment to talk about being positive community members. This is our IFC and our Panhellenic communities. Every organization that is on the back of this sheet, with the exception of the Professional Greek Council, and those organizations, has requirements that they're educated on at least 2 programs each semester. And those programs fall into different categories, but some of them, I mean, for a lot of the time, the fraternities and sororities that are on College Hill bring in Alex, and they talk about positive, not only positive community building, but they talk about, what are ways in which, they need to follow, Pullman, or city ordinances, university policies, things of that nature. So it's a lot of that education aspect that even the Pullman Police Department is offering. But they bring in other folks throughout, and there's a lot of programming that's available.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, excellent presentation. I appreciate it. But Justin raised a good question. You don't have to be hazed to go to a dorm or go to an apartment. I think fraternity hazing ought to end. Sorority hazing.
Yeah,
period.
and I don't think
that's inappropriate.
Yeah, and I would not disagree with you. And I think Matthew brought up a very good point there. I don't think anyone would disagree that hazing is not acceptable, that it doesn't have a place in our organizations. We know that on a national level, the National Interfraternity Conference, as well as the NPC, which is the National Panhellenic Conference, are taking very large steps to reduce that. But once again, these are 18 to 22-year-olds that are gathering a lot of their information from hazing that takes place in their college or their high school football teams or their high school soccer teams. We're noticing that hazing is happening on a national level, much more at a high school level, and they're carrying that tradition up. So whereas before it was socially acceptable to haze newer members, now it's become not socially acceptable from alumni and older members to do that. But they're also getting that messaging from high schools that it's okay. And so sometimes that message is different. And I think, our students have said themselves, like, we do not, hazing has no place in our campus, has no place in the activities of our organizations. And when organizations are alleged to have committed hazing, they go through the processes and they know that there's pretty severe consequences. Washington State has one of the strictest hazing laws, and the Washington State University has a very strict interpretation of said hazing law. One of the things to note that if you weren't aware, the university is going through emergency rules as it relates to our student conduct code. And our student conduct code mandates now, or the emergency rules mandate, if a penultimate sanction is sought, meaning the removal of recognition of an organization, a fraternity, sorority, club sport, college Democrats, if it's that removal is sought, they would go in front of an administrative law judge. Very different than going in front of a board of your peers and arguing a case. So in that aspect, that's a pretty severe consequence where that judge is making a determination that your organization can exist or not. The same thing happens now with anyone who faces suspension of more than 10 days or expulsion from the institution. So I think from an institutional level, we recognize the seriousness. From an organizational level, we're recognizing the seriousness of this as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Thank you all for letting me come in. I greatly appreciate it, okay?
Thank you so much for
Have a
your
good
time.
one.
All right, so we can probably go ahead and get started with our new member applicants at this point. Like I said before, I mean, we've never had this many applicants here on one night, so thank you guys all for showing up. Wow, 5 of you. So I guess we'll get started on this process. I thought we would go, rather than in order of having you guys on here, that we would go in order of category in which you guys applied for instead. So starting with, let's see, WSU faculty staff category. I think that, let's see, Chris, you were in that category. So we can go ahead and get started with Chris, and then who else do we have in that category? David. Oh yeah, then David. Okay. So Chris, if you could just give us a quick introduction of your interest in the committee, and then we can talk about the interview after that.
Yeah, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're interested in being part of the Police Advisory Committee.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, hi. Thank you for having me. My name is Chris Santucci. Currently, I'm a PhD student in sociology over at Washington State University. I'm also on a graduate assistantship where I teach and do research as well. I'm interested because my research interest within sociology is primarily focused in criminology. So I study both the front end with the policing methods, specifically with juveniles. I study prosecutorial discretion. I study corrections, recidivism, criminological aspect, terrorism, all that fun stuff. I was a United States Navy sailor from 2009 to 2013, where I was a military law enforcement officer for the United States Navy. So that's kind of where I got my first start. Also, I then earned my undergraduate degree in criminal justice. So that's a little bit about my background. I'm interested in participating in this council because I think the bridge between community and police is of utmost importance to any even effective policing. Without respect and cooperation with the community, police can't do their jobs effectively. And again, that connection cannot be understated. I'm here because I think I can offer a good opinion. I'm very data-driven, very quantitative-driven. My research is more applied than it is theoretical, so I intend to create research that actually helps law enforcement, helps corrections, and everyone in between. So I believe that I can help. I think I can offer valuable insight, and I look forward to just kind of seeing what happens.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
Yeah. Yep. How long are you going to be staying in Pullman? I know you said you were working on a PhD.
Yeah, so I'm in my first year, so I'll be here for at least 5 years.
Awesome.
So if I let it be clear, if I do get on this council, my intent is to be on this council until I graduate.
Great. Any other questions? So we can talk about our interview after we have, are we going to have them step out for
Yeah,
that part?
well, why don't we just have them all come up and then we'll have them all step out at the same time.
Okay,
Does that
well,
sound
that,
good?
yeah, that sounds, that sounds good, because otherwise we're gonna be doing this back and forth, so. Okay, perfect, thank you so much. And then we'll have David come up.
Thank you. I'm Dave Bachman. Excuse me. I'm a lifelong Washington resident. I've lived a few other places, but I did my undergrad studies here. I actually know about hazing. I was at West Point out of high school first, so I definitely know about hazing. And I first learned about fraternities there. My twin brother was here, and he said, yeah, you know, he was in a dorm, so he was a little biased, you know. Yeah, there's all these Greeks, they go down to the river, and they're sunning and all this. I'm thinking from West Point, New York, how are all these Mediterranean types here at Pullman? How are there so many of them? I had no idea what that meant. But anyway, you know, I heard of the vacancy, and I'd be happy to serve. I, again, did my undergrad studies here. I hitchhiked from West Point to here when I was medically discharged for an Army wrestling injury. You know, I saw the opening, happy if I'm of use. If I'm not a good fit, that's fine. Did my undergrad studies here. I came back as a professor in '99, and in between I was back here most years or all years probably for a football game. Yeah, I've lived in Pioneer Hill for many years and elsewhere. So yeah, if I can serve, I'm happy to. If not, that's fine too. So.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
What
Are you a
department?
professor? Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
we were asking the same thing.
Sorry, electrical engineering, computer science. I got degrees in computer science and math here in 1985, and then yeah. So I'm tenured. You know, I tend to be here till I retire. You know, so.
Thank you.
But you can kick me off the committee before that if you know. If I'm not
You're really on this.
I know.
whole, like,
How long
you're
will that
gonna
be?
What?
How long until you plan on retiring and leaving us?
I don't know if that's a.
Some of us on here are retired, Matthew.
Yeah.
Well, he said he's been on plan on
Well,
leaving when he
probably
retires.
about 70. You know, WSU has a nice thing where, as at least as a faculty, you can kind of go to half-time anytime after age 55. Now, probably that I wouldn't until 70, you know, unless health intervened or something. But
I'm just kidding. It sounds like you plan on being around Pullman permanently, right? Okay.
unless someone decides otherwise, and they can get away with it. So,
Now stop antagonizing our
He
members.
antagonizes people.
no,
so-
I appreciate questions. Not just you.
Fight.
Questions are good.
And you're running for Pioneer Hill? Or
No, faculty.
Faculty and staff.
Faculty. And again, you know, if faculty staff is covered elsewhere, that's fine with me. It can be a primary backup or not at all, whatever. Just offering my services. You know, I served for 8 years on the Whitman County elected salary commission, and that was, you know, just, again, it was a need, so, and I learned from that. And I have absolutely no, you know, this is not a stepping stone for me to be a political office. I learned that I didn't, in grad school, I got along quite well without scraping my face every day, and I wouldn't want to have to do that, which I would have to do to be a politician, so, you know. I do have a concealed pistol license, although I'm not packing heat at this time. I'm not sure if it's allowed here. So I do 1,000-yard rifle competitions too. I could talk a long time, but I'll just leave it at that. So,
Thank
Thank
Chief
you.
was glad that you didn't bring it.
Well, we got the taser last time.
Yeah. We're a weapon-free organization, right? Except for. Okay, great. Well, so now I'm going to move on to multicultural category, and I'd like to invite Angela. Let's see, I have Kevin written down here, but I know that's not right, so. Angelo, sorry.
First names.
That's okay. It's kind of cool to have two first names. You can have the name you use for the people you don't like and the name of people you do like.
I'm Angelo Brown. I'm a PhD student in criminal justice. I'm interested in being part of the committee because wherever I've been, I just moved here, but I've always been involved in the community and some type of law enforcement. I did my master's at Arizona State and worked with Tempe PD. I did a cadet program in my undergrad. And as being a minority, you know, I always want to help police relations with, you know, whatever community it is, Islamic community, black community, you know, sometimes there's issues revolving that. So I feel like I have a lot of input in that. And yeah, my research has been done a lot about community police relations, you know, for the last couple of years. So if you have any questions, I know that was short, but.
Yeah. Questions? Yep.
Yeah, what did you say your research was on? Can you expand on that? I just want to know.
So for my master's thesis, I did community policing involving counterterrorism. So how community policing could help, you know, the community of that region to, you know, give tips and whatnot to the police and how that affects just like terrorism and whatnot. And I looked at a lot of countries: Israel, United States, Britain, and whatnot. So.
You said you're doing research now as well?
Yes, I'm actually working with Dr. Macon. He does a lot of work on body cams. I'm working a little bit with Chief Jenkins and whatnot. So.
Okay. Do you talk to that guy at all?
No, but we will have
All right. The same question I pitched to the other two. You said you're working on a PhD. How long you plan on staying in Pullman?
You know, definitely until I finish my dissertation and whatnot, and you know, maybe if I get a position with some type of research or law enforcement in the area, I'll stay. But I guess wherever the opportunity takes me, I'm not sure.
So approximately
3 to 4 years.
Yeah, I would say.
If you don't mind saying, if you want to be a sadist, ask him every 6 months. Then what month?
How's your dissertation going?
Yeah.
Plot that over time.
Please don't tell them that.
That's just, I know some professors that actually do that in grad schools.
Okay.
You just moved here from Tempe?
Yeah, I finished my master's last year, and then I lived in the summer. I lived in California. I worked for a Native American tribe, Great in Rancheria. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but so I worked with Native youth all summer and came up here. So.
Okay.
Perfect. Well,
Thank
thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Oh, wait, one more question. Sorry.
I'm a BA and MA from Arizona State. Go Sun Devils.
I see, yes, sir.
Okay, sorry, a comment.
All right.
All right, thank you so much. All right, so moving on to the Pullman School District. Stephanie, can you come up and talk to us quickly?
Good evening, I'm Stephanie Rink. I just moved here in actually December 27th through all the snow from the west side of Vancouver, Washington. I work at the college with the Carson College of Business. I was on the WC Vancouver campus. I'm here wanting to represent the Pullman School District. I have two middle schoolers, two young girls that I can't believe they're already this old. I was just speaking with Corey earlier, is that my daughter, my first daughter, was born here when the hospital was only 4 months old, which was really neat. And then we left shortly after. Had my undergrad here in Pullman, my master's at Merrillhurst in Oregon, and went with WC Vancouver, and now I'm back here with business. And that's about it for me.
Any questions?
Matthew, questions?
What are your thoughts on community policing?
Wonderful. I think a lot of my family is actually on the Portland Police and retired from the Portland Police, and so I have actually been quite involved with that and seen how important it is, especially for schools, of not only understanding what the roles are, but having children know that the police are not just there to get the bad guys, but they're actually there to help and protect and teach kids all about safety, not only from themselves, but also from strangers and different things. So it's quite important.
And how long do you plan on staying in Pullman?
Well, we moved back here from the west side because we love Pullman so much. So we do plan on staying here for quite a long time.
Awesome. All right, thank you very much.
Yeah. Anything else? Okay.
Thank you. And then Bailey. So in our last category, we have you slotted down for at-large. I know you selected two different categories, but we put you down for at-large.
Good evening, I'm Bailey Bressler. I live on College Hill currently, and I'm an undergraduate at Washington State University for political science. Currently, right now, what I'm doing for work is I'm in the National Guard, Cavalry Scout. Why I want to be on this committee is because I view Pullman as my home now, and I want to be more active in my community, and I view the police force as the protectors of the community, and they're really the face and the embodiment of how our community works and how our community operates. I'd like to open up for questions now.
I'll ask you the same question I've asked everyone. How long do you plan on staying in Pullman?
Yes, so obviously I'm an undergraduate, so I'm going to be graduating soon, actually in May. I have an open door for the graduate school, it sounds like, so I'd like to maybe pursue that under Dr. Preston and Dr. Cottom. Other than that, I mean, if Georgetown gives me an acceptance letter, then maybe I might move out to DC.
Okay.
Anything else? Any other questions?
What would you be going to graduate school for?
Political science.
I'm biased. I think that's a very good discipline. So, yeah. Well, thank you so much. We
Thank you so
appreciate
much.
that. All right. So at this point, we're just going to have you guys step in the hallway, socialize, and we will come out and grab you guys after the committee has been done talking about the interviews. Chief, do you think I should pause? So I'm going to pause the recording of this meeting at this point, and then so all people being interviewed, once they're out, we'll get to discussion of how the interviews that the Chief and I had went.
So,
I just resumed recording.
yeah,
So
that's our
just so
sign.
you know.
Yeah, we didn't record
during-
anything
yeah.
between the time you guys were gone until just now.
Yeah, so that's when I do the signal, it means I'm pausing for
So
whatever.
you can't see what we said about you.
On
'Cause
YouTube.
I tried
Yeah,
to do
it's all-
that.
I'm not
But it was
gonna lie.
probably mostly good if you're still sitting here. So.
Yeah, so-
Or at least sort of, yeah.
Yeah, sort of. So, well, first, I mean, welcome to all of the new members. This is great to have so many people that are interested in serving on the committee. And I want to just tell you not to be discouraged about not having a whole room full of people here. You know, really, the committee is in existence to be available to the community all the time, but also particularly when there's a need, and that's not all the time, and that's actually a good sign, in my book anyway, that it's not completely full of people, because it was full of people, that means we have a lot of problems we've got to resolve. But we're in a position to resolve those problems because of the existence of the committee, and so just your participation and being here for that, for when those times come, is really important. So I just don't want you to be discouraged when there isn't a lot of community participation, but you do serve an important role in the community, and I really value your input and connection with the community and what you can help me to bring a better law enforcement product to the community. So thank you all.
And we have Steve. So
Yeah, and Steve, he's a big audience, actually.
We have a groupie. We do have a groupie.
There's a lot of stuff that he'll talk about, but yeah.
This is Corey's husband.
Yeah, my husband, Steve. We've been trying to convince him to apply, but, you know, he's intimidated by us all, so. Anyway, yeah, so thank you so much for joining the committee. We really appreciate that this is your volunteer hours, this is your time of day, and this is something you guys do once a month with us here, and it's, you're constantly thinking about it. I think over time, at first, when I first got put on the committee, I was like, okay, I'm super passionate about this, but I didn't really know what it entailed. But just slowly over time, it became instinctual. I started asking my neighbors if they had any issues. You know, even my husband, if he has issues in his yard. We had an open case on code enforcement for 4 months over grass trimmings. So you never know what's going to come up. And it's just nice that we have people in the community listening to what people are saying and what's going on, and coming here and just reflecting that voice to the community here. So we appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so we always wrap things up by passing it back to Chief Jenkins for our police department update.
All right, so it's pretty short this month. So we are continuing on filling our records vacancies. We currently have one vacancy due to a resignation of one of our record specialists who wanted a position that didn't require shift work. We also will need to fill a second position because one of our record specialists applied for the vacant code enforcement position, and so we will be moving her to that position, which will be a second vacancy in records. But we don't want to move her until we get at least another person hired to fill one of the vacancies in records. So we are working our way down the current hiring list and doing chief's interviews, and then in some cases starting background investigations. And so that's where we are on those vacancies. We are still going through the budget process. I had asked, my calculations, I think we're about 6 officers short right now of where we should be. This year I asked for 3 additional officers and 1 code enforcement officer. At this time I've been told that I can move forward on hiring 1 police officer, 1 additional officer. We did apply to Department of Justice for what's called the COPS hiring grant, which will partially fund, for in our case, up to 2 officers based on our population. They extended the deadline on when we would hear back from that because of the hurricanes on the East Coast and extending the application deadline for law enforcement agencies there. So I'm not exactly sure when we're going to hear back on that. If we're approved for both of those, it may have an impact on my ability to hire more, and it may not. The council still may say that we still cannot fund the balance and then commit to funding them beyond the grant. So right now we know we can hire 1 more officer, and we're waiting to hear about the others. On the council meeting on September 12th, we brought forward the proposal to amend our taxi ordinance, which would accommodate companies such as Uber and Lyft. Council did pass that ordinance, and Uber and Lyft are now operational in the city. I think they're working on getting drivers in the area licensed through them. I know that Lyft had a hiring event here. I saw it on social media that they were trying to hire drivers, and so, well, I think we'll see a lot more availability of their drivers in our area. September 13th, I attended the Whitman County Landlord Tenant Association meeting. Attended with one of our code enforcement officers, Elizabeth. Used to be Elizabeth Schaefer. It's now Elizabeth O.J. And Sergeant Sam Sorm attended as well, and they were interested in hearing about what's going on in the College Hill core area, where we've been concentrating on addressing particularly trash issues since the beginning of the school year. And so what I reported to them is that we had about 42 cases generated that code enforcement handled. I think only a handful of those were called in. The rest of them were officer initiated. And we only issued 3 citations, and the rest were warnings. And all the warnings that we issued, there has not been any reoccurrence. So, so far it looks like we've been having some type of an impact. I'm curious to hear from your perspective, Barbara, if you've seen any.
I think
change.
so, yeah.
Good. September 15th, College Hill officer Alex Gordon and I met with the men's basketball team. We're usually invited every year at the beginning of the season just to talk with the team about conduct in the community and how to stay out of trouble. And frankly, with the men's basketball team, shortly after Coach Ernie Kent has been here, we've had very little issues with the men's basketball team. So I think he's had a really positive impact. September 20th, I attended the College Hill Association annual meeting along with Code Enforcement Officer Emily Johns, and our city supervisor Adam Lincoln attended that as well, and answered some questions about noise ordinance, and that's the only one I remember, Barbara.
Trash.
And trash. So anyway, we stay in regular contact with College Hill Association. They have they do a lot of positive things up on College Hill, and so we try to partner with them and try to help them in their efforts, and also they're in ear for us too, to let us know what's going on and where we need to focus efforts. On September 30th, we had a disaster exercise at the Pullman Moscow Regional Airport. The FAA requires the airport to hold a full-scale functional exercise every 3 years, and then on the other years they just hold tabletop exercises. In the past, the airport has planned these exercises on their own, and so they've been, from what I've seen, fairly limited in value, and so we asked Washington State University Emergency Management to help plan a full-scale exercise, and they agreed. And so we had involvement from all the regional fire departments and fire districts, law enforcement, including the other side of the state line. We had agencies from Idaho here helping as well. We had the coroner's office, hospitals, TSA, FBI. So it was a really good exercise, and the idea is really to figure out where there are needs for improvement, where we need to improve communication. Oh, and Alaska Airlines also participated. The scenario was that a plane upon takeoff crashed immediately at the end of the runway with the volleyball team on board. And so we had PIOs from the city and the airport and WSU because when something like that were to happen, there would just be a lot of chaos and a lot of people wanting a lot of information really quickly about who was on board and those types of things. And so it really put the appropriate amount of stress on all of those factors, with Alaska Airlines having the the list of those that were on board, and people asking questions at WSU about confirming whether certain people were there, and trying to identify what patients were transported to which hospital, because of our hospitals wouldn't have been able to take all of the injured, so they had to distribute them out to different hospitals, and then had set up a temporary morgue. So it was pretty complex, and found out a lot of areas where we can shore up, and so it was a really worthwhile exercise. October 4th is National Coffee with a Cop Day. And so McDonald's on South Grand invited us to come there with Whitman County Sheriffs and WSU Police Department, and so we were there and had a few people show up, and just were able to sit and talk and answer questions and just have a conversation with people. So I think this is something that we'll do annually, and hopefully we'll have our attendance will grow as we do it more. The only thing I have coming up is on October 31st is a city council meeting where department heads will be making their budget presentations on Halloween night. So I'll probably dress as a policeman and do my budget presentation. So that's all I've got.
Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, I guess follow up to the presentation from earlier, I was kind of wondering how you would characterize Pullman PD's relationship with the Greek system, and then to follow up on that, are there any challenges unique to that subset of students that you don't see in the rest of the student population?
Well, because they are organizations and groups and they have a leadership structure, we have an ability to communicate with them, I think probably more so than maybe just the general student population, which would be like the ASWSU. Right. So in fact, the recent incidents that we had following some football games with couch burnings up on College Hill, we have enlisted the help of the Greek leadership to help us address those issues and try to prevent those in the future, since they're occurring on College Hill around the Greek Row area. There may be Greeks involved, there may not be, but they have a big influence in the area where it's happening, and so we think they can help us have some impact there. And like he mentioned, our College Hill officer spends a lot of his time just developing those relationships with the Greek community. Something I was going to mention before Nicholas left, but I think he had some other meetings to get to, and I think I've told this committee about this other meeting. It's called the Multicultural Student Services Meeting. And we meet approximately monthly, sometimes depending on if there's conflicts, every other month, but it's the leaders from the multicultural student groups meet with us and Nicholas and some other people from the university and with WSUPD, and so Alex Gordon and I are there. And it's a really good opportunity, again, to develop relationships so that when things happen, we already have a relationship developed so that we can have a conversation about some things that might have happened between law enforcement and minority community. We've already developed some trust. We help them with their events, and if they're coming off campus for us, helping provide security for their events, if they're going to be doing a march or something like that. And so it's a really good opportunity to have those relationships where, the university really facilitates that. And if we didn't have that opportunity, we would still make efforts on outreach, but it really helps to have everybody on board that sees the benefit of having those relationships. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
I don't think I have any questions. Anyone else? So, thank you, Chief Jenkins. Mm-hmm. So next we do our constituencies poll, and typically we just go around, state our name, and then what area we represent. So Angela, we could start with you. I understand this is your first day, so if you just want to introduce yourself and pass, you're welcome to do that too. But if you also have any questions or anything, input, that'd be great too. So either way.
Oh yes, I'm Angelo, and it's nice to meet you all. I'd like to know you better, and I don't have any questions at the moment.
Okay, perfect.
Stephanie, thank you again, and it's a pleasure to be here. And again, I also hope to get to know all of you. And I have nothing to report at the moment.
Perfect. Okay.
Bailey, nice to meet you all again. I have nothing to report at the moment.
Richard Hume, Pioneer Hill. I'm conflicted here because this might be inappropriate, but I've had 4 conversations with residents, which is more than I usually have in a year. I'll just say their concerns, the Pullman Parks and Recreation mailing just came out. Their concerns on Pioneer Hill that they're going to put an events center in Lawson Gardens. And without taking a political stand, I'll just say that's an issue on Pioneer Hill.
Yeah, I'm not sure I've heard about that yet. Do you know anything about that, Chief Jenkins?
Well, it's a part of a bond, one of the bonds, and so there is information on the city's website where the city provides just informational materials about the bonds.
Right.
The city and their employees are prohibited from campaigning for or against bonds. All they can do is provide informational materials
I think it came out in the Pullman disposal bill,
with
along with
information.
their little blue and yellow things. I think that the bond thing came in that this month.
Okay. I missed that one. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. I'm Amy. I'm from Military Hill, and I have nothing to report.
Justin, also from Military Hill, and I too have nothing to report.
Matt Sutherland from College Hill, and the main concern I've been hearing about are the couch burnings you already addressed. So.
And and let me just add to that too. The crime is depending on exactly where it takes place is a pretty low level misdemeanor, which would be like blocking the street essentially. It could be a malicious mischief if the person who owned the couch did not consent to have it burned. But if it's close to say a tree that could then spread to a structure or close to a structure, then it could be a felony if it endangered a structure imminently. And so it does. Our main concern really is it spreads our resources and fire department resources thin, typically during the time when we are already spread thin, going to a lot of calls. So it just diverts our attention. So like I mentioned, we're working with. I think the Greek community can have a lot of influence in that area, and so hopefully we'll see some
Assuming
change.
those conversations have been positive so far.
Yeah.
Okay, my name's Cora Woodley, and I am at business community now. So I've changed around so many times because we just kind of move me around, and then we get new applicants. So I have nothing to report for the business community right now, but I'm curious. Do you notice that car prowls and things like harassment cases increase during football game nights, or is that something that's not necessarily correlated?
I would say I don't think there's really a correlation. Sometimes we'll see an uptick in thefts and car prowls during a weekend home game, not necessarily the night of the game, but bringing in people from out of town, a lot of people from out of town in. Sometimes those will go up, but I wouldn't say that there's necessarily a significant correlation.
Mm-hmm. So no more than usual this last month?
Right, and the car prowls that have seemed to go from hill to hill, those just are very sporadic. And we've identified some people that we are certainly responsible for some, but there's more people that are involved in doing these. So we haven't had any really good leads on those other than the one case that we do have somebody identified.
Perfect, thank you.
Barbara Hammond, College Hill, and no, trash has been a little better, a little less broken glass, and nothing new to report.
Phyllis Stallcop, Sunnyside Hill, and I have nothing.
Chris Santucci, WSU faculty and staff, and I'm gonna break, and I actually do have a question for you, Chief. I know for Washington State, those bomb threats that happened a couple months back were startling. And perhaps it's from my personal background, but talking to some of the other students, I was wondering what the likelihood of either gaining a dog team or contracting out for an explosive detection dog, if that is even a possibility in Pullman. And if so, if there's anything that we can do, because those big towers, as WC Police and your members know, is really difficult to clear in a timely fashion. And so I was wondering what your thoughts on that was.
So, well, for on-campus incidents, that would be a question for WSU Police. But there are some resources regionally for explosive dogs. ATF has, I think, 1 or 2 dogs up in the Spokane area as well, and TSA does as well. And I'm not sure about the Spokane Police Department, but I do know there are a couple of resources. So there are some available regionally. Of course, there's a time frame on getting them here when we need them. I know that there's been times that explosives dogs have been used prior to home football games, but that's done. I'm not aware of a time that it's been done because of a specific threat. I think it's just been done kind of as a drill. So I would say that for the Pullman Police Department, I don't know that there's enough work to justify obtaining one for us, unless we include within it the university, which I think there's a lot better case on the university end of it to have that resource available. So I know that's not a great. I don't know if that really answers what you're.
No, that actually helps, because I mean, even if there was something that worked, that Pullman PD and WC PD worked in concert and just shared one dog is even a thought. But thank you for answering this.
All right, so any public comment today? You're not going to welcome the new committee members? No. All right, so our next meeting is Monday, November 13th at 2017. I was going to ask Chief if you would be interested in doing a presentation on your trip to Samoa.
Oh, sure, I will.
For that, because it would be, I want to get him to talk to us about that before he forgets all the fun details.
Can you
So-
wear what you wore there?
Yes, that
The
was going
answer
to be
to
my
that is
question.
no.
Oh,
Rats.
she's
Sorry.
thinking the way I'm
I might
thinking.
show a picture.
Okay.
Oh, I can. If you don't, I know where pictures
Oh,
are.
I'm sure you do.
So we'll put that onto the agenda for the next meeting if
Okay,
you're okay with
yeah.
that. And other than that, I think we're good to go here. We're almost out of time anyway, so.
Move adjourn?
All right, second?
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, you guys are free.